everyone, it's Zane, and today I'm going to be reviewing A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This book is a very loose Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I want to emphasize that it's a very loose retelling. Now, first of all, I had so much trouble with this review just because I read the second book in the series, A Court of Mist and Fury, and so much changed from the first book to the second book. I just found that the characters were different, the plot obviously was different, the writing was the same, but again, the characters were a lot different, so that kind of threw things off for me. And I really should have done this review before I read the second book, but here we are. This book follows our main character, Farah, who lives in the Mortal Lands. Basically, you have the Mortal Lands and the Fairy Lands and a big wall that separates the two. I actually don't know if it's a wall. I'm thinking of Game of Thrones right now. There's some form of separation between the Fairy Lands and the Mortal Lands. In the Fairy Lands, you have different courts, which correspond to either different seasons or different times of the day. You have the Autumn Court, the Spring Court, the Summer Court, and the Winter Court. And then you have the Night Court, the Dawn Court, and the Day Court. The powers that the fairies possess correspond to the court that they reside in. I just really loved the powers and the elemental control featured in this book. Ever since watching the cartoon Avatar: The Last Airbender, I've just been so into elemental control. The world was just done really, really well. It was well fleshed out. You had a lot of world building at the start, which did kind of take away from the plot, but you did have a lot going on with the world, and I really, really liked that. The world building was done so seamlessly in that there weren't a lot of info dumps at you. It kind of happened gradually as you went on. The world was explained in little pieces as the book progressed, and I thought that was really great. Now again, as I mentioned, the plot was a little bit slower because there was so much world building and so much characterization going on at the start of the book. And normally that would be okay, but I just thought there came a point where not a whole lot was happening in this book. We were kind of in the same place for quite a while, and we were just kind of going through the motions, and I thought that it could have gone just a little bit faster. With that being said, the last half of this book was absolutely incredible. We had a great breaking point, which I really, really loved. We had great action, we had great dialogue, we had great characters, and it was just so much tension and angst, and it was just really great. Now moving on to the writing, I have so much trouble assessing writing just because I never have any glaring issues. There are very few times where I won't like the writing in a book, so again, you know, the descriptions were on point, the voice was great, perspective, tone, everything just seemed to be great, especially the dialogue. I found that we learned a lot about our characters through the dialogue. It was very snappy and very witty at times, and I thought that it was done really, really well. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about writing. I thought it was great. I had no issues with it. Now moving on to characters. Again, this is hard because I have read the second book, and things do change a lot, especially when it comes to our characters. But I will give my assessment of the characters as far as this book goes. We had our first character, Farah, who she was kind of dumb in a lot of ways, and I hate saying that, but she just made a lot of choices that didn't make sense, and she played into the trope of that headstrong female character where she would make decisions that again didn't make sense and were just rash, and you just were like, what are you doing, like please stop. And it was hard to connect with her because she was so cold at times, and again that's playing into that trope. But you know, you want to be able to connect with your main character. With that being said, because her backstory was done really well, you understood why she is the way that she is. What I will say though is that she was authentic. Now moving on to our next character, Tamlin. I don't have any strong feelings about Tamlin, positive or negative. He was just kind of there for me. I know you're supposed to have very strong feelings towards him, and I did, but there was just something missing, and it's just so clever because again, I read the second book and things really start to make sense. So again, for Tamlin, I just didn't feel very strongly about him. Moving on to our next character, Lucian. I really, really liked him. I really liked how Lucian looked out for Farah in this book. I thought it was done really well, and he was really relatable for that reason. Moving on to Rhysand or Rhysand, whatever you want to call him. It's just, again, hard. I know I've said this so many times, and that's probably really annoying, but I've read the second book, and things change, but I hated him in this book. But there was this shroud of mystery surrounding him, and that made him an extremely intriguing and alluring character. At first, you think, oh, this guy's totally the villain. He's the one we're trying to root against. But then this other character comes along who's absolutely awful and despicable. Some people say she's not a good character in that she's a bit flat and one-dimensional, but I completely disagree with this just because we got a great backstory from her. Maybe having a backstory is just like the bare minimum of a good villain, but I don't know, I really connected with her. Well, not connected with her. I thought that Amarantha was a character who you understood why she was doing the things that she was doing. You almost felt sympathy for her, and you're like, well, she's awful, but she's also very damaged, so I get it. Overall, the characters are great. They all had a backstory, which I really liked. Even some of the characters that were minor in this book, they had a backstory, and the way that they were made sense and was always consistent with their backstory. So overall, I really enjoyed the characters in this book. I liked how they all had a backstory, and I found that it was really easy to connect to some of them because of this. Or even if you couldn't connect to them, it was easy to understand them because of their backstories. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars just because the plot was a little bit slow at the start, and if you read the second book, I know I've been harping about the second book, but it's excellent. You kind of look at the first book and think, wow, the second book was miles ahead of the first book, so that kind of affected my rating as well after having read the second book. If you like a standard YA fantasy that has some Beauty and the Beast elements and some great characters, I would definitely recommend this book. Even if you don't love this book, I think it's so worth it for the second book, but if you don't like the second book, obviously don't continue on with the series. One thing I should mention is that sex is part of this book, and it is certainly part of the second book. So if you're not into that, then definitely give the series a miss. Thank you guys so much for watching. I post new videos every week, so if you want to be notified for when I post new videos, please be sure to hit subscribe, and I will see you soon with a new video.